November 17th, 1944. 5:47 hours, Peleliu Island. Corporal James Donovan, 22 years old, crouches inside a coral cave that reeks of cordite and death. His Thompson submachine gun feels useless in his trembling hands. 30 feet away, through a gap in the jagged rock, he can see them, Japanese soldiers moving behind, reinforced concrete pillboxes, immune to everything the Marines have thrown at them for the past 58 days. The standard 45 ACP rounds from his Thompson might as well be spitballs against those fortifications. He's watched 14 men from his platoon die, trying to crack these positions. Flamethrowers run dry. Bazookas bounce, off at wrong angles. The Japanese defenders have turned the Yummerbrogel pocket into a fortress that swallows Americans whole. Donovan's sergeant crawls up beside him, carrying a wooden crate stamped with red letters. M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge. Experimental authorized personnel only. Inside are rounds that look wrong. Too long, too heavy with a copper-colored projectile where the bullet should be. Load these, the sergeant whispers. Intel says the Japs call them something in their radio chatter. Bakudan Akuma. Boom devil. Donovan has no idea what he's holding. He only knows that in 6 minutes, when the barrage lifts, he'll find out if these strange rounds can do what 2,000 tons of naval shells couldn't. The Pacific War had created a problem that nobody in the U.S. military had anticipated when they designed the Thompson submachine gun. Back in 1921, John T. Thompson's famous trench broom was engineered to fire 45 ACP pistol ammunition, powerful for killing unarmored men in close quarters, but utterly inadequate against the reinforced defensive positions that Japanese forces constructed throughout the island-hopping campaign. By late 1943, American forces had encountered a nightmare scenario repeated across Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu. Japanese defenders who had months to prepare converted natural cave systems and coral limestone into interconnected fortress networks. Intelligence reports from the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 documented bunkers built from coconut logs, coral aggregate concrete, and steel railroad ties that could withstand direct hits from 16 inches naval guns. The Marines suffered 47 casualties, taking an island 2.4 miles long. They found defenders alive in bunkers that had endured 3 days of bombardment that consumed more ammunition than the entire Guadalcanal campaign. The standard infantry weapons, the M1 Garand rifle, the M1 carbine, and the Thompson submachine gun, all fired conventional bullets designed to penetrate flesh, not fortifications. A 45 ACP round from a Thompson carried 355 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle, enough to drop a man instantly, but deformed or shattered against concrete after penetrating barely 2 inches. The M1 Garand's 306 round performed better, achieving 6 to 8 in of concrete penetration, but still couldn't reach defenders sheltered behind multiple layers of reinforcement. Flamethrowers worked, but required operators to approach within 40 yards. A death sentence when every bunker had interlocking fields of fire. Explosive charges placed by combat engineers proved effective, but cost American lives at a horrific exchange rate. During the Peleliu campaign, which began September 15, 1944, engineers suffered casualty rates exceeding 40%. The 1st Marine Division deployed 9,000 men and suffered 6,526 casualties, a 72.5% casualty rate that exceeded Valley Forge and Below Wood. By October 1944, the Marine Corps had identified a critical gap in the infantry arsenal. No man-portable weapon existed that could deliver explosive force through firing ports, cave openings, and bunker embrasures from a position of relative safety. The Ordnance Department had been working on a solution since early 1944, but the security classification was so tight that even division-level intelligence officers didn't know it existed. The weapon that arrived on Peleliu in November 1944 represented a radical departure from conventional ammunition design. Engineers at Frankford Arsenal in Philadelphia had spent 8 months developing what they officially designated the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge, a Thompson submachine gun round that carried a small explosive, charge instead of a solid bullet. The concept violated every principle of small arms ammunition design. But desperation drives innovation. Standard ammunition development cycles took 18 to 24 months from concept to field deployment. The M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge went from drawing board to combat in 32 weeks, compressed by battlefield urgency and classified urgent priority by General Douglas MacArthur himself after casualty reports from Tarawa crossed his desk in December 1943. If you want to see how American engineers turned a submachine gun into a handheld bunker buster, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. This story gets even more intense, and you won't want to miss the moment these rounds first made contact with Japanese fortifications. Back to Corporal Donovan and those strange ammunition crates. The M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge looked like no ammunition Donovan had ever seen, and for good reason. It wasn't ammunition in the conventional sense. Instead of a solid lead projectile designed to penetrate and tumble through tissue, each round carried a 48-grain charge of composition. C2 plastic explosive encased in a copper-jacketed frangible projectile that weighed 180 grains, nearly twice the weight of standard 45 ACP hardball. The cartridge case itself was modified from standard 45 ACP brass, but extended to 1.2275 in instead of the usual 0.898 in, to accommodate the unusual payload. The propellant charge used improved military rifle powder instead of standard pistol powder, generating 18,000 psi of chamber pressure compared to the Thompson's usual 21,000 psi rating. Engineers had deliberately reduced pressure to prevent catastrophic failure when firing explosive projectiles through a weapon never designed for such stresses. The frangible projectile represented the revolutionary element. Frankford Arsenal metallurgists created a compressed copper matrix loaded with tungsten particulate that would hold together during barrel transit but shatter on impact, releasing the explosive core. The projectile achieved 950-foot purse muzzle velocity, slower than standard 45 ACP's 830 frames per second, but carrying significantly more energy. The additional mass and velocity combined to deliver 361 foot-pounds, comparable to conventional rounds, but with an explosive payload that multiplied effectiveness exponentially. Inside the copper jacket, the 48-grain C2 charge surrounded AM-42 electric detonator no larger than a grain of rice. The detonator used piezoelectric crystals that generated a firing impulse when subjected to the sudden deceleration of impact. The same principle used in artillery proximity fuses, but miniaturized to fit inside a 45 caliber projectile. The detonation occurred 0.03 seconds after impact, just as the frangible jacket disintegrated against the target surface. The ammunition came packed in reinforced wooden crates of 200 rounds, each crate weighing 37 pounds and marked with red hazard diamonds and serial numbers beginning with FA-EXP 444. Supply officers received special handling instructions printed on water-resistant paper that accompanied each crate. Storage temperature between 40 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. No stacking above 4 crates high. Minimum 50-foot separation from conventional ammunition, and immediate reporting of any rounds showing corrosion or deformation. Field testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland during August 1944 had demonstrated capabilities that seemed impossible for a submachine gun round against 4 inches of reinforced concrete. Conventional 45 ACP achieved 1.8 in of penetration. The M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge punched through completely, then detonated against the rear surface, creating a spalling effect that sent concrete fragments ricocheting through a test chamber with enough energy to penetrate 3/4-inch pine boards placed 6 feet behind the target. Ordnance engineers nicknamed the ammunition Little Devil during development, but security protocols prohibited informal designations on any documentation. The official specification sheet classified secret and numbered FM OD89144 described a round as suitable for engaging reinforced personnel shelters, light fortifications, and area targets behind intermediate barriers when fired from M1928A1 or M1A1 submachine guns. The Thompson required no modifications to fire the new ammunition, but the operating manual issued to units receiving the cartridges specified several critical procedures. Operators needed to fire in semi-automatic mode only. Full automatic fire wrist barrel overheating that could potentially detonate unfired rounds in the chamber. Maximum engagement range was listed as 75 yards, beyond which the frangible projectile became unstable and could tumble or fragment prematurely. Each weapon could safely fire 120 rounds before requiring a 20-minute cooling period. The rounds arrived on Pluon, November 12, 1944, aboard the ammunition ship USS Wrangell, which had departed San Francisco on October 28, carrying 840,000 rounds distributed in 4,200 crates. Division ordnance officers initially received no explanation for special cargo, just orders to distribute it to Thompson-equipped personnel in companies engaged in cave fighting operations. Sergeant Thomas Whitmore, the man who handed Donovan that first crate, had attended a 30-minute briefing the previous day where a harried captain from Ordnance explained the basics. Explosive rounds effective against fortifications. Don't cook them off. Don't tell anyone outside your unit. Donovan loads 15 rounds into his 20-round stick magazine. The cartridges clicking against each other with a sound slightly different from regular ammunition, a heavier, more substantial clunk. The rounds feel strange in his hands, dense and ominous, each one a tiny bomb waiting for permission to explode. 553 hours. For minutes until the barrage lifts, Donovan chambers the first M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge, feeling the bolt close with more resistance than normal. The longer cartridge barely fits. The magazine well, his hands have stopped shaking. Around him, 6 other Marines crouch with similar loads. They're Thompsons, loaded with ammunition that their training never covered. The naval bombardment from USS Mississippi reaches crescendo. 14-inch shells screaming overhead every 8 seconds, each one hitting the ridge above the cave complex with enough force to make the ground jump. Donovan can feel it through his boots, through his bones. A rhythmic pounding that should have leveled everything, but has only made the Japanese dig deeper. 555 hours, 2 minutes. Sergeant Whitmore hand signals the firing sequence. 7 targets, 7 shooters. The bunker complex ahead sprawls across 200 yards of coral ridgeline. Each position connected by tunnels the Marines can't reach. Intelligence estimates 140 Japanese. Defenders still alive in there, many of them wounded, but all of them armed and waiting. Donovan's target is firing port number 3, a rectangular opening 18, in wide, 4 feet off the ground, cut through 3 feet of reinforced concrete. Through binoculars earlier, he had seen the barrel of a Nambu machine gun just visible inside, covering the approach to the next ridge. That Nambu had killed 5 Marines yesterday. 556 hours, 1 minute. His breathing slows. Marine training drilled through months at Camp Pendleton takes over. Sight, picture, trigger control, follow through, except now he's firing. Explosives from a weapon designed to spray lead. And nobody really knows what will happen. The Mississippi fires her last salvo. The shells impact with sequential thunder that echoes off the coral, and then silence descends. The terrible silence that always precedes an assault when every man knows some of them won't see sunset. 557 hours. Light them up, Whitmore screams. Donovan rises from cover, Thompson shouldered, front sight centered on that firing port, 47 yards distant. He squeezes, semi-auto controlled, exactly as the briefing specified. The Thompson bucks, harder than normal. The recoil impulse sharp and sudden. The frangible round arcs across the gap. Impact. The explosion isn't loud, nothing like a grenade or satchel charge. It's a sharp crack followed by a flash of white light. And suddenly, the firing port isn't there anymore. The concrete around it fractures outward in a star pattern. Chunks the size of baseballs blowing back toward Donovan's position. Through the dust, he can see inside the bunker now. The Nambu machine gun lies sideways, its operator slumped against the wall. Holy Mother of God! Someone whispers beside him. Donovan fires again. And again. Each round punches into the weakened concrete. Each explosion, blasting deeper, widening the hole. After his seventh shot, the entire front wall of the firing port collapses inward, creating an opening large enough to see 3 Japanese soldiers scrambling away from a breach, their faces masks of shock. To his left and right, the other Marines fire their own volleys. Firing port after firing port erupts in that same distinctive crack flash pattern. The sound creates a rhythm, crack, 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 like a carpenter driving nails, except each nail tears through concrete that had withstood 3 days of bombardment. Donovan empties his magazine in 90 seconds. 15 rounds, 11 hits. The bunker that had seemed invincible that morning now looks like Swiss cheese, its walls fractured and crumbling, smoke pouring from the breaches. The Nambu gun is silent, has been silent since his second shot. The Marines advance. Donovan reloads. Conventional 45 ACP now, saving the explosive rounds for the next hard point. They reach the shattered bunker and peer inside. 3 Japanese soldiers lie dead from concrete spalling, their bodies torn by fragments traveling at rifle velocities. The Nambu's operator died from the first explosion. The frangible round had detonated against the concrete directly above his head, and the spalling effect had driven a chunk of concrete through his skull. No flamethrower, no satchel charge, no engineer crawling into killing range, just a Thompson submachine gun and ammunition that turned fortifications into death traps for their occupants. By 6:45 hours, 48 minutes after the first shot, Donovan's platoon had neutralized 11 bunkers that had held up the advance for 4 days. Casualties: 1 Marine wounded by return. Fire compared to 14 killed and 23 wounded in the previous 4 days. Attacking the same positions with conventional weapons. The word spread through the division by nightfall. Radio operators intercepted Japanese communications describing Bakudan Akuma. Boomville, a weapon that made their bunkers into coffins. The psychological impact matched the tactical effectiveness. Defenders who felt invincible behind concrete now understood that concrete couldn't save them. The initial deployment of 840,000 M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridges to PLU represented only the first wave of production, program that would expand dramatically through the final year of the Pacific War. Frankford Arsenal, operating 3 shifts across 24-hour cycles, manufactured 14.2 million rounds between November 1944 and August 1945. Those security restrictions limited distribution to specially designated units with high-intensity cave fighting missions. Production faced immediate bottlenecks. The M42 detonators required hand assembly by technicians with electronics training, a skill set in short supply as the Manhattan Project and proximity fuse programs absorbed qualified personnel. Frankford Arsenal employed 347 women from Philadelphia's radio manufacturing sector, many of them former RCA employees who could assemble the microscopic detonator components with adequate precision. Each detonator costs $1.47 to manufacture compared to $0 Bio 3 for a conventional 45 ACP cartridge. The composition C2 explosive presented different challenges. DuPont's explosives department at the Haskell Laboratory in Delaware produced the plastic in 500-pound batches. But the loading process, injecting 48 grains into each copper jacket without air, pockets that could cause premature detonation, required specialized equipment that didn't exist until December 1944. Engineers adapted pharmaceutical pill pressing machinery, achieving production rates of 12,000 rounds per day. By January 1945, distribution followed strict protocols established by the Chemical Warfare Service, despite the ammunition containing no chemical agents. Each shipment required armed guards, segregated storage aboard transport vessels, and documentation tracking every crate from Philadelphia to forward positions. The USS Wrangell made 4 additional runs to Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa between December 1944 and June 1945, carrying a total of 6.88 million rounds that would never appear on standard ordnance inventories. At Iwo Jima, which the Marines invaded on February 19, 1945, the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge proved devastating. Against the most elaborate fortifications the Japanese had constructed, Mount Suribachi alone contained 640 bunkers, pillboxes, and cave entrances connected by 11 m of tunnels. Marine units equipped with explosive Thompson rounds systematically collapsed firing ports and cave entrances, often bypassing positions, rather than clearing them, entombing defenders who could no longer engage. American forces, First Lieutenant Harold Schreer, who would later raise the first flag on Suri, Bachi Summit, reported firing 340 explosive rounds during the advance up the mountain's northern slope. His after-action report, declassified in 1993, described the ammunition's effect. We could approach bunkers that previously required flamethrower teams or demolitions. 3 to 5 rounds through a firing port would collapse the opening or create enough interior fragmentation to neutralize defenders, save countless lives. The Japanese attempted countermeasures. Intelligence recovered from Iwo Jima. Documents dated March 1945 included diagrams showing modified bunker designs, with angled firing ports intended to deflect projectiles and increased concrete thickness at vulnerable points. These adaptations came too late. American forces had already adapted their tactics, firing multiple rounds at acute angles to defeat the modifications. At Okinawa, the largest amphibious invasion of the Pacific War, the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge reached its widest deployment. The 96-day battle consumed 4.3 million rounds of explosive Thompson ammunition distributed among 7 Marine and Army divisions. Casualty statistics showed the impact. Units equipped with the ammunition suffered 31% fewer casualties during bunker assaults compared to units using conventional weapons and tactics. Supply officers documented persistent problems. The ammunition sensitivity to temperature fluctuations caused approximately 2.3% of rounds to fail, either detonating prematurely or failing to detonate at all. Humidity degraded the piezoelectric crystals, particularly during Okinawa's rainy season, when some units reported failure rates approaching 8%. Field armor manuals updated in May 1945 instructed personnel to inspect every round before loading, checking for corrosion on the copper jacket or deformation of the projectile. Japanese radio intercepts increased throughout early 1945. American Kodorikers at Station Hypo in Hawaii translated dozens of messages referencing Bakudan Akuma or Dynamite bullets, often with requests for guidance on countering the threat. No effective countermeasure existed. The Japanese industrial base lacked the capacity to retrofit thousands of fortifications with explosion-resistant materials, and by mid-1945, Allied air and naval superiority prevented major defensive improvements. The psychological dimension exceeded tactical impact. Prisoners interrogated after Okinawa described the terror of hearing the distinctive crack pattern approaching their positions, knowing their concrete walls would soon fragment into deadly shrapnel. Some positions surrendered after receiving only token fire, the defenders, unwilling to endure bunker collapse. This represented a profound shift. Japanese forces that had fought to annihilation at Tarawa and Saipan were now surrendering to avoid burial alive. The engineering behind the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge represented a masterclass in applied explosives chemistry and precision metalworking, pushing the boundaries of what could be achieved with 1940s manufacturing. Technology, understanding how the round actually functioned, requires examining the weapon system as an integrated whole, cartridge, weapon, and operator. The Frangible projectile's copper matrix used a specific alloy, 88% copper, 8% tungsten for percent tin. This combination provided enough structural integrity to survive the violent acceleration of firing. Peak acceleration exceeded 40,000 GS during the 0-8 seconds the projectile traveled through the Thompson's barrel, while remaining brittle enough to shatter on impact. Metallurgical testing at Frankford Arsenal determined that standard copper-jacketed bullets were too ductile, deforming rather than fragmenting, which could smother the explosive core before detonation. The tungsten particulates served dual purposes. They increased projectile density, improving ballistic coefficient and downrange energy retention. More critically, they created stress concentration points within the copper matrix that guaranteed fragmentation into 40 to 60 pieces upon impact, each piece traveling outward at velocities between 800 and 1.200 feet per second. High-speed photography captured during testing showed the fragmentation pattern resembling a flower blooming in micros. Seconds. The C2 explosive core occupied approximately 40% of the projectile's volume, compressed to 1.66 G per centimeter, dense enough to remain stable during firing, but not so dense that detonation became unreliable. The 48 grain charge, equal to approximately 3.1 G, generated a detonation velocity of 6,400 meters per second and a detonation pressure of 180,000 psi when initiated. This seems modest compared to military explosives like TNT or RDX, but within the confined space behind a bunker firing port, it created an overpressure wave that could rupture organs and render defenders unconscious even without direct fragment hits. The M42 detonator measured 0.12 in diameter and 0.19 in long, making it one of the smallest functional detonators produced during World War II. Its piezoelectric crystal barium, titanate synthesized at high temperature and doped with trace calcium, generated approximately 400 volts when subjected to the impact deceleration. This voltage arced across a 0.08 in gap to ignite a 2-gram primary charge led aside, which in turn initiated the C2 main charge. The system sensitivity presented the primary operational challenge. Impact velocities below 400 feet per second sometimes fail to generate sufficient detonator voltage, causing duds. Oblique impacts, projectiles striking at angles greater than 60 degrees from perpendicular, could fragment the jacket prematurely, exposing the explosive before detonation. Field testing on Plu documented these failure modes, leading to updated firing doctrine, emphasizing perpendicular shots at close range. The Thompson's relatively slow cyclic rate, approximately 700 rounds per minute in full automatic, became an advantage rather than a limitation. Faster firing weapons would generate barrel temperatures that approach C2's detonation threshold of 415 degrees Fahrenheit. The Thompson's heavy barrel and moderate rate of fire allowed operators to fire 40 to 50 rounds in rapid succession before heat buildup became dangerous. Thermoplanes embedded in test weapons measured peak barrel temperatures of 380 degrees Fahrenheit. After sustained firing, operators learned to recognize warning signs of overheating. The weapon's hand guard would become uncomfortable to touch. Smoke might rise from the barrel shroud. Most tellingly, ejected brass would show discoloration. Brass normally ejects bright and golden, but overheated cases turned purple-brown. From heat stress, smart Thompson gunners carried two weapons, alternating between them during extended engagements. The ammunition's weight created handling challenges. A 20-round magazine loaded, with M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridges weighed 2.8 pounds compared to 1.9 pounds for conventional 45 ACP. Combat loads typically included 4 magazines, 2 with explosive rounds, 2 with conventional ammunition for A. Total weight increase of approximately 3.6 pounds. This seems trivial until combined with the 67 pounds combat load Marines already carried on Pacific Islands. Accuracy suffered compared to conventional ammunition. The frangible projectiles. Slightly asymmetric construction, unavoidable given hand assembly. Processes cause it to tumble beyond 90 yards. At 50 yards, trained shooters could achieve 8 in groups from bench rests. At 100 yards, groups open to 24. This limited the ammunition's effective range, but most cave fighting occurred at ranges under 75 yards, where the dispersion remained acceptable. The Japanese captured several thousand rounds during overrun positions and attempted to reverse engineer the technology. Documents recovered after the war showed engineers at the Frankford Arsenal in Japan examining the ammunition in April 1945. They successfully identified the explosive compound and detonator principle, but lacked the precision, manufacturing capability to replicate it. Japanese attempts to produce similar ammunition resulted in catastrophic weapon failures. At least 3 Type 100 submachine guns exploded during testing, killing 2 technicians. Production of the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge ceased on August 17, 1945, 2 days after Japan's surrender announcement. Frankford Arsenal received immediate orders to halt manufacturing and segregate all remaining inventory for classified storage. Of the 14.22 million rounds produced, approximately 8.7 million have been shipped to Pacific theaters. The remaining 5.5 million rounds went into hermetically sealed containers stored at Letterkenny Army Depot in Pennsylvania, where they would remain for 31 years. The ammunition's existence remained classified secret until 1976, when the Freedom of Information Act forced declassification of World War II ordnance development programs. Even then, the military released only limited technical documentation. Complete specifications, including manufacturing processes and detonator schematics, remained classified until 1998, cited as potentially useful to enemies developing similar systems. Veterans who had used the ammunition lived with peculiar restrictions. They could acknowledge firing Thompsons, could describe cave fighting operations, but couldn't mention the explosive rounds without violating security oaths they'd signed. James Donovan, the Marine, corporal who fired the first combat rounds on Peleliu, returned to his job as a Philadelphia electrician in 1946 and told nobody, not his wife, not his children, about the boom, devil ammunition until the 1976 declassification. He died in 1989, having granted only one interview about his experience to a military historian in 1981. The stockpiled ammunition presented disposal challenges. By 1976, the C-2 explosive had degraded significantly, with some rounds showing crystallization that made them dangerously unstable. The Army elected to destroy the entire stockpile through controlled detonation at Letterkenny's demolition range. Between 1977 and 1979, each round was X-rayed to verify detonator condition, then destroyed individually in blast chambers. The process consumed 27 months and cost $1.4 million. Modern military forces have developed conceptual descendants of the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge, though none achieved widespread adoption. The OCSW Objective Cruise served weapon program in the late 1990s produced 25mm air burst rounds using similar pitot electric detonation principles. DARPA's Exacto program explored self-guided explosive projectiles for $5 caliber sniper rifles. The Israeli military developed specialized explosive rounds for urban combat applications. All faced the same challenges that limited the Thompson rounds: cost, complexity, and sensitivity that made them impractical for general issue. The concept influenced modern weapons doctrine more than specific hardware. Today's infantry carries thermoelectric shoulder-fired weapons, programmable air, burst munitions, and precision-guided missiles that can engage fortified positions from standoff ranges. These weapons reflect lessons learned from Pacific cave fighting. Infantry needs organic firepower to defeat hardened positions without requiring engineer support or waiting for artillery. Interestingly, the Japanese name Bakudan Akuma entered Cold War intelligence lexicon as a classification for any small arms ammunition carrying explosive payloads. Soviet bloc intelligence services used the term in translated documents through the 1960s, apparently unaware it originated as Japanese slang rather than official U.S. military terminology. The humanitarian implications emerged during post-war analysis. The M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge technically violated no existing laws of warfare. The 1899 HEG Declaration only prohibited expanding bullets, not explosive projectiles below specific calibers. However, its effectiveness in confined spaces raised questions about proportionality and unnecessary suffering that influenced later discussions of combat ammunition regulations. These debates contributed to protocols added to the Geneva Conventions in 1977 that restricted certain ammunition types, though none specifically mentioned the World War II explosive Thompson rounds. Corporal James Donovan survived Peleliu and the war, receiving a Bronze Star for actions that couldn't be fully described. In the citation, the official language mentioned exceptional valor in reducing enemy fortifications. Without specifying how he accomplished this, he understood secrecy mattered more than recognition. Sergeant Thomas Whitmore, who handed Donovan that first crate of experimental ammunition, died on Iwo Jima on February 26, 1945, shot by a Japanese sniper while directing fire against a bunker complex on the island's northern coast. His after-action reports on the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridges effectiveness influenced the expanded production that equipped forces at Okinawa. The engineers at Frankford Arsenal received no public recognition for their work until the 1998 declassification release. Many had died by then. Eleanor Hutchkins, one of the 347 women who assembled M42 detonators, lived until 2003. In a 2001 interview, she recalled the work with mixed emotions. We knew we were saving American boys' lives. We knew each round we made meant some Marine wouldn't have to crawl up to a bunker with explosives. But we also knew we were making weapons to kill people, even if those people were trying to kill us first. It's complicated. Veterans who use the ammunition in combat rarely discussed it, even after declassification. The peculiar nature of the weapon, a submachine gun firing explosive rounds, seemed too strange to explain to civilians who hadn't experienced Pacific cave fighting. When they did talk, they focused on what the ammunition represented. Proof that America would innovate anything, develop anything to bring its soldiers home alive. Modern soldiers fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan encountered similar fortified positions and expressed similar frustrations about weapons inadequate for the threat. Some learned about the M1 Frangible Grenade Cartridge through military history courses and wondered why such ammunition never returned to service. The answer involves cost, legal complexities, and the evolution of warfare. Modern conflicts involve different rules, different enemies, different constraints that make explosive small arms ammunition problematic despite its tactical effectiveness. The Marines who stormed Peleliu's caves with explosive Thompson rounds didn't fight for glory or recognition. They fought for the men beside them, using weapons that seemed impossible until desperation made them necessary. That same spirit, innovation born from necessity, sacrifice hidden by Classification: victory measured in lives saved rather than battles won, defines every generation of warriors who adapt, improvise, and overcome. If this story moved you, if you understand now what Bakudan Akuma meant, to both the men who fired it and those who faced it, honor that history by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Click the notification bell so you never miss stories about the weapons, the warriors, and the moments that shaped World War II but remained hidden for decades. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if anyone in your family served during World War II. These stories matter because the men who lived them mattered, and their sacrifices deserve to be remembered even when the weapons they carried were too secret to discuss for 31 years. To Corporal Donovan, Sergeant Whitmore, and the 347 women at Frankford Arsenal who assembled tiny detonators in the service of something larger than themselves. Thank you. You're Boom Devil. Saved lives, won battles, and proved that American innovation could turn even a 1920 submachine gun into a weapon that made concrete fortresses into death, traps for those who thought themselves invincible. Never forget,